Welcome to the Recovery Cast, brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private.
Hello there. Welcome back to another episode of the Recovery Cast, brought to you proudly by Hills and Rangers Private. My name is Oliver and I'm a recovering addict. And today on the line we have another member of staff at Hills and Rangers Private. Her name is Lauren. Say hello, Lauren.
Hi, Oliver.
Hey, welcome on the show. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Oh, it's a pleasure. It's nice to sort of chat with each member of staff and see what it's all about, what their experience is like working there and what they get out of it. So we'll jump straight in. Today we are reading from the JFT, and the reading is October the 24th, and it's entitled Responsibility. It's a bit of a deep one. Here we go. We are not responsible for our disease, only for our recovery. As we begin to apply what we have learned, our lives begin to change for the better. Basic text, page 91. The further we go in recovery, the less we avoid responsibility for ourselves and our actions. By applying the principles of the Narcotics Anonymous program, we are able to change our lives. Our existence takes on new meaning as we accept responsibility and the freedom of choice responsibility implies. We do not take recovery for granted. We take responsibility for our recovery by working the 12 steps with a sponsor. We go to meetings regularly and share with the newcomer what was freely given to us, the gift of recovery. We become involved with our home group and accept responsibility for our part in sharing recovery with the still suffering addict. As we learn how to effectively practice spiritual principles in all areas of our lives, the quality of our lives improves. Just for today, using the spiritual tools I've gained in recovery, I'm willing and able to make responsible choices. That is a very complex reading, and there are a lot of things mentioned in it. What do you think?
I tend to agree with you. I think it is quite, not complicated so much, but it's very intense.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, we're talking about responsibility and how we become more responsible through our recovery. Talks about spiritual principles, working the program, and what else have we got here? We've got, working the steps with a sponsor, the 12th step, sharing with newcomers what was freely given to us, doing service, and the last thing, I think, just more spiritual principles. So we can probably touch on some of this stuff in this about 18 minutes or so. We'll do our best. But first, I have the questions that I have been directed to ask you for this episode, which are, what do you do at Hills and Rangers Private?
I'm the lead facilitator, which means I am in charge of delivering the program to the clients. And I also provide one-on-one counselling to some of our clients.
So the clients will be dealing with you really often, and you'll probably be the person that they speak to the most. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yes, that's correct.
Wow, fantastic. And can you give us perhaps, I'm making up these questions as we go along. What is the average day at the chalet at Hills and Rangers Private like?
I'm not sure there is an average. I think rehabilitation can be quite unpredictable, and there's always something new and exciting going on. But the clients begin their day by doing readings like the one we've just read, and they share their reflections on those readings with each other. and then they have a couple of sessions throughout the day of curriculum, we call it, and this is where I deliver the program to them. So this involves me discussing certain topics and strategies with them, and also there's some written work that they do, basically looking into their behaviours to help them take responsibility. So it's very prominent reading for today, yeah. So they do a lot of work on identifying certain behavioural patterns, things like that, so that we can strategise and help them to make the changes in their lives and become responsible and accountable.
It's certainly a huge sort of journey that they would be beginning by coming in to Hills and Ranges Private. And I certainly remember my experience of being in treatment, how I began to very slowly learn a little bit about the behaviours and habits that were causing me to perhaps sort of create more and more problems for myself as I went along. And being in treatment it was really, I used it as a springboard to sort of jump straight back into life and grow in that way. That also brings us to we're talking about, so what was freely given to us in the reading. They're talking about sharing with newcomers what was given to us. And it's really interesting for me because I've noticed, and I've spoken to Adam as well about it, that it's one of the only treatment facilities that I know of where the staff are encouraged to share their own personal experience with the clients. Could you go into that a little bit?
Absolutely. I think that's what sets us apart from other rehabilitation facilities. The staff are all in recovery themselves, and so we're able to share our experience with the clients, and I feel that this helps them to feel more understood without any judgment, because there's a lot of stigma around addiction, and there's a lot of judgment from general society around it, and we want these people to be able to open up, get honest with themselves and with other people about the nature of their addiction and their behaviours, so that they can learn to be a better version of themselves. If we have any type of judgment on those behaviours, on the things that they may have done during their addiction and to maintain their addiction, then we're not giving them the best environment to be able to move forward.
Absolutely.
So
I think, sorry to interrupt you. I think it just sort of is a fantastic way to start dismantling that huge burden of guilt and shame that I can say that I certainly carried that with me into treatment, that I was really had done some things that I wasn't happy to be honest about and share about. And we were talking about these spiritual principles in the reading of honesty being one of the most important ones. And I think when the staff have that honesty from the get-go, it really sets an environment for the clients to open up and start being honest and open up that dialogue of, well, I did this, and the staff, if the staff can listen in a way that's not just like, say, your average psychologist or psychiatrist who goes home to their nice house at the end of the day and doesn't really have any insight, it's a totally different experience. And I think that must be where that power comes from. It's really fantastic.
Absolutely, yeah. I agree.
So we'll just have a quick break, and then we will come back, and I've got a few more questions planned for you. So just stand by. Thank you.
You're listening to the Recovery Cast, brought to you by Hills and Ranges Private. Like what you hear? Then visit us at www.rehab.melbourne for more shows.
Oh, that wasn't the smoothest transition. Anyway, we will push on. So, Lauren, I was going to ask you, what do you get out of your role at Hills and Ranges Private?
Well, there's a saying in recovery that you only keep what you have by giving it away. And for me, that rings very true. being able to share my experience with the clients to help them on their journey is extremely rewarding. I get to see them at the beginning of their recovery journey, and ultimately their stay in Hills and Ranges isn't very long in terms of the greater picture, in terms of the rest of their life. It's a very short period of time, but I see a lot of growth and change in that time. And it warms my heart to be able to assist people and guide people through that part of their journey like people did for me.
Fantastic. Wow. That's so powerful. I really agree with that. I remember what I felt like when I came into treatment, just being so raw and so broken. And then even though it was a very, very short time, I was only in treatment for 21 days. It wasn't a kind of 9-month program or something like that. It was effectively just a detox, more or less, a little bit longer. And what I was like when I left was a very, very big transformation, and it was just the preliminary stage. The transformation kept going as I left, and I'll tell you now, I haven't said it on this podcast before, but what I did when I left rehab, I was discharged at 9:30 on the Monday morning, and I looked online and I found out that there was a midday meeting for Narcotics Anonymous around the corner. It was literally 500 meters away. So I went and sat in a coffee shop for 2 hours, and then I rocked up to the meeting half an hour early, and there were already people waiting outside. And that was very much my early recovery. Is I did have that. We're talking about spiritual principles. Willingness is a huge one. So I was willing to do that. And if it wasn't for the treatment, I wouldn't have gotten there. I found that 12-step program through my treatment, and it just allowed me to find it and keep going with it. So that I think really places that treatment for me as, one of the first steps in learning to grow and take responsibility for my problem, of addiction. So I guess, we can talk about briefly, we'll talk about perhaps how you personally have become a more responsible person through the process of your recovery. Would you like to talk about that for a bit? Sure. Cool. So yeah.
Go on.
No, you go.
I very much feel like my whole life I was blaming other people. I thought that everybody else had a problem and that I was okay. And if you didn't do that or you didn't say that, then I wouldn't have to behave the way I did. So there was absolutely no accountability and responsibility for my own actions. Coming into recovery, it's been a slow and steady process of learning to be responsible. And even in terms of decision making, a lot of my decision making was done under the influence and with the intent of maintaining the addiction. So bad choices were made. At other times, I allowed other people to make decisions for me. So in recovery, it's been a whole new experience of taking responsibility for my behaviours, but also for the decisions I make for my future. I think it's been an extremely freeing experience. It's almost like coming into adulthood again. Learning to be an adult, learning to do things for myself, learning to make decisions for myself, and being responsible for how I conduct myself. I'm not a perfect angel now that I'm in recovery. I do sometimes revert back to old thinking or old behaviours, but I have an awareness around those now, and I can pull myself up very quickly and look at why I'm behaving the way I am. And put something in place to change that. And I think that's a big part of responsibility.
It's a huge part of responsibility. There's a lot of stuff you talked about there, and it was also so true. I think about those decisions that I made and how everything was other people's fault and other people's problem and not my problem. And I hear that time and time again in meetings and just from people in recovery, is that being in recovery is part of that transition into just learning to take that responsibility. And for me, at the beginning, it was an extremely scary and difficult transition to make. Even those little transitions of just learning to you said that it was almost like coming into adulthood, and I totally agree. I started using when I was in my sort of mid-teens, and I really feel like I stopped developing at some level when I started using, and I wasn't learning and making those really tough decisions when I was at that age, and I had to learn to do that when I was in recovery at the age of 26, 27 when I came into recovery. It was almost like I was 15, and I really felt that sort of angst and that teenage. It was just extremely uncomfortable to arrive at the point of being in my mid to late 20s and sort of having to learn these things that I should have learned. Perhaps I say should, but it's just the way it was, and I just had to go with it and roll with it. And it was a continuous battle of taking responsibility for myself. I've literally really only very, very recently actually moved out of my mum's house. That is, and I'm 4 years clean. It's just so amazing to be experiencing this at this age, but it really is actually taking responsibility for myself in a very practical level of, yes, I pay my own rent, I have my own house. If I don't clean my room and do my washing or clean up the kitchen or make food, it doesn't get done, And
absolutely,
when I was in active addiction, none of that stuff got done. My room looked like someone had thrown a grenade in there, and now my girlfriend had slapped me around the head and say, clean our room, but it's very simple stuff like that, and it becomes, there's more sort of nitty-gritty things as well of being emotionally responsible, of not falling apart when a bill arrives or there's a parking ticket, or just basic life stuff. Is that we in my experience is the more I stay clean, the better I get at doing life.
Absolutely,
that's literally just that. And it says, just for today, using the spiritual tools I've gained in recovery, I'm willing and able to make responsible choices. I'm trying to make responsible choices. It's either buy food or buy that thing online that I've been looking at for the last 2 weeks. And that's where I'm at now. Is that it's the saga continues.
Absolutely. And my favourite part of this reading is in the beginning. We're not responsible for our disease, only for our recovery. As you were saying, if you don't clean your room or you don't do the washing or you don't buy the food, it doesn't get done. The same translates for recovery. Nobody can do my recovery for me. I have to turn up at a meeting. I have to reach out to my sponsor. I have to do the step work, et cetera, et cetera. I can't have anyone else being responsible for that because it's my journey. So in terms of we are not responsible for our disease, to me what that means is, example, if I am going through something really, really quite tough and my first thought is, I know what'll fix this. If I use, I won't have to feel this emotion. I'm not responsible for that thought. That's my disease. What I am responsible for is my recovery. It's what action I take. So do I sit in that self-pity and do I run with it and start planning how I'm going to go and get on? Or do I ring my sponsor, or do I ring a friend in recovery? Do I reach out to someone and say, hey, I need some help? How do I tackle this in a healthy, productive way?
Oh, you are the fire in the studio today. You've been absolutely a real pleasure to have as a guest. All the things you've said are absolutely fantastic. So, I'd just really, really like to thank you, Lauren, for coming on the show. I'm sure we'll get you back in on another episode because some of those things they just make so much sense to me.
Thank you so much for having me, Oliver.
It's an absolute pleasure. Awesome. Well, you've been listening to another episode of the Recovery Cast. I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you next time. Have a lovely day. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Recovery Cast. For more, visit us at www.rehab.melbourne.